Final Fantasy is a weird series. It started with this turn-based NES game becoming a surprise hit back in 1987 as this clunky yet distinct Tolkien homage, and would then go on to steadily build cultural momentum for the first 10 years of its life with one improved release after another, with only like one serious misstep along the way. Okay, maybe two. The series would then proceed to absolutely explode with the release of Final Fantasy VII and redefine the shape of weeb culture for an entire generation with its spiky hair, angsty boys, and Tetsuya Nomura. And this is even before we talk about the games that followed it. Say what you will about Final Fantasy VIII, but that thing sold enough gunblades to supply a small army made up entirely of soldiers with broken wrists. 9 is basically perfect, and no, I don't think that's an exaggeration, and while it hasn't endured the same kind of lasting love as 7, FF10 may very well have had the same level of cultural impact since all the adults could finally look at it and actually recognize people now. Meanwhile, all the teens could look at it and see the greatest Hot Topic advertisement ever created. There was so much hype behind this franchise at one point that even an idea as transparently terrible as the compilation of Final Fantasy VII seemed like it might actually be worth taking seriously. Movie with dead-eyed CGI puppets? Sign me the f*** up. But that was also kind of it, wasn't it? Once you've got the kind of momentum that lets you sell basically anything to an ever-hungry audience, you, well, start to sell basically anything to an ever-hungry audience, don't you? And when you start to sell basically anything, quality control tends to start to slip as you begin to force more slop down the sluice gate. And that's how you manage to release one of the best JRPGs ever about 2 months after you released this.
Long has it been since I faced a worthy opponent?
Yeah, things got wacky for a while. Remember the time we got a sequel to FF4 that no one asked for? Remember that time you could shred sick gnar on your phone with Cloud? Remember the tale of Icarus? A couple years later, FF13 would come out and, depending on who you talk to, was either easily the worst game in the series, or, no really, it's not that bad, trust me, it totally opens up around 75 hours in. That first person was me. That second person was Tetsuya Nomura. Regardless of what you think of 13 though, it's undeniable that it marked an odd turn for the series. Once it released, suddenly there were simultaneously too many FF games, yet somehow not enough. Between the release of Final Fantasy XIII in December 2009 and 15 in November of 2016, the Final Fantasy franchise was blessed with the release of Final Fantasy Dimensions, Final Fantasy Explorer, 2 desperate bids to try and give Lightning a personality after the fact, the MMO Final Fantasy XIV, 4 Heroes of Light, the Etch Rhythm, I'm not pronouncing that right, Airborne Brigade, Tactic, Dimensions 2, because it warranted a sequel, I guess. All of the bad Dissidia games. FF14 again after it failed the first time. Agito. Brave Exvius. Mobius Final Fantasy. Type 0. And of course, Final Fantasy all the f***ing bravest.
You need to be stopped! Say goodbye! I'll erase you completely!
They sold out big time. I maybe listed half the games released, especially if we count Japanese exclusive games. Not all of these were bad, of course, and a couple of them stand as some of the best experiences you can have in the series. But regardless of what your opinion on any of these is, the fact is that to the eyes of a casual observer, it would appear that Final Fantasy spent nearly an entire decade spinning their wheels and spewing out cheap spin-offs while desperately struggling to get what was increasingly looking like vaporware out of production hell, with no apparent plans to even make an FF15 until the exact moment they realized they could solve both of those problems at once. And FF15 is fine overall. It's a completely functional game with a lot to love. But I think it's also safe to say that it wasn't quite what everyone was hoping it would be. Casual players were hoping to get a masterpiece that was worth a 7-year wait, Squeenix was clearly hoping to make it an entire franchise in and unto itself, and FF fans were hoping we'd get a game to put Final Fantasy back on the map as one of gaming's big prestige franchises. But none of that really happened. Instead, we got a fun yet inexplicably incomplete romp that was going to get finished by DLC before Square realized their dream of selling us $100 high-fashion Noctis t-shirts wasn't going to work out. It did well, but it wasn't Final Fantasy VII. And oh boy did they want this to be on the same scale as Final Fantasy VII. So now we're here, with this franchise that basically bet its continued relevancy on a game that was received with all of the excitement of winning a $20 scratcher card. Oh yeah, that's nice, I guess. Meanwhile, the sheer scope of oversaturation of spin-offs and constant innovation means that the brand itself has been so thoroughly diluted as to mean almost nothing. These days, what are you getting when you buy a Final Fantasy game? Is it going to be a single-player JRPG? An online MMO? An offline MMO? A mediocre action game? Rhythm game? Money funnel to Square Enix? Want a masterpiece? Want trash? Gun? Yes. We got it. The series had every aspect of it, from its mechanics to its music to its art to its characters, so thoroughly monetized that they all effectively mean nothing. Because that's how selling out works. If you slap your characters on actual cups of top ramen, you can't be that surprised when people begin to consider your brand to be kinda cheap, no matter how many Gucci sponsorships you manage to land.
What the hell is wrong with you?
What?
This is exactly why Bill Watterson refused to ever merchandise Calvin and Hobbes. For real, look it up. So what's the point of all of this? Why dredge up this saga of artistic legacy versus corporate nihilism? Well, you see, I recently decided to throw caution to the wind, cave in what little social life I had left, and decided to give Final Fantasy XIV a shot. And, it's good. Like, absurdly good. Like, at least Final Fantasy X good. If not on the same tier as 6 or 7. No, I am not joking. This game has a story. It is exceptional. We will talk more about that at length soon. But suffice to say that it has catapulted me down a rabbit hole of revisiting Final Fantasy media which I'd long thought past me. And I believe it was somewhere around the time that I was grinding in FF5 while listening to Final Fantasy VII as I was waiting for my dungeon queue to pop in FF14 so I could grind up my Scholar before I saw the car from 15 fly past me in a land of Shakespearean fairies that I realized Final Fantasy is a weird series. For reasons now previously stated. While Final Fantasy's experimentations haven't always been successful to say the least, the fact that they're so broad and eclectic means that, for better and for worse, there truly is nothing else quite like it as a franchise. Fantasy is an amazingly nebulous term once you break it down, and Square has made good use of that fact since the SNES to depict such a broad array of different kinds of fantasy that basically nothing could ever look out of place in it. High fantasy, followed by dystopian fantasy, to dystopian sci-fi, to romantic science fantasy, back to high fantasy with more death, to southeast fantasy unlike basically anything else. Final Fantasy's brand identity has become so broad that it can not only become whatever the hell it wants, it's basically already been doing that for about 3 decades. And that's fascinating. Here's the real thing though. I, like many of you, grew up with Final Fantasy as a pretty major cornerstone of my life. FF7 was my own personal ground zero for realizing these game things could give me these repulsive stomach bugs that make me deeply uncomfortable, which I'm told are called fail lines. And for that, I shall never forgive it. However, after being a consistent presence in my life for over 2 decades, it certainly feels like at some point along the line, probably the exact second I finished 13, I began to take the existence of Final Fantasy for granted. And I don't think I'm alone in that. It's hard not to take anything for granted that's been around that long, even if that thing is a Prada-sponsored mega series about rocks and airships. As such, it begs the question, what even are these games, actually? What was it that made some of what they had to say so powerful? Are they all that good? Are the bad ones actually that bad? And what was it that made all of them so special? Then and now. So, having more or less just replayed the series in its entirety, I would like to take a broad look at this fascinating tangled mass of Mogpoms and Choco Feathers. Over the coming weeks, I will be looking back at this franchise with fresh eyes and an open heart, re-examining the good and the bad. See what we may have missed, and maybe find something new to love along the way. So consider this a formal invitation. I hope you'll be kind enough to join me. See you soon. Hey y'all, Ryan here. Left real quick with Jade to help write the official guide for the new Animal Crossing game. Yes, really, but I'm back now and ready to sell my soul to the crushing nightmare that is the YouTube algorithm once again. On a related note, if you're liking New Horizons, might I recommend checking out the guide? We worked really hard on it. I basically lived at Nintendo of America for a month working on it, and I think it came out really great. Highly recommended, and no, this isn't sponsored. I'm just really proud of it. I'll also talk more about the experience at length if anyone would be interested to hear it. In the meantime, I would like to give a very special thanks to everyone who is currently helping me keep my head above water in these weird times over on Patreon. People such as Revan, Thomas Hederman, Neo Nico, Rebirth Path, Kevin Thurber, Black Mage App, and everyone else who is currently helping me out. Thank you all so much. And thank you for watching. Gonna be trying my best to keep uploading something every Monday for the foreseeable future. Some of it may be non-Final Fantasy, some of it will definitely be the Perfect Parry podcast, which is coming back very soon, all of which will be great, so be sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell, mail me an Aerith body pillow, whatever to make sure you don't miss it and help out the channel. See you again real soon. Love y'all. Peace.